Right throughout the morning. With me now live from Melbourne is the Assistant Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. And before we get on to domestic issues, I know you're a close watcher of the Australia-Indonesia relationship, Josh Frydenberg. A pivotal day in the sense that the government now wants to try and rebuild the strained relationship with Jakarta.
Well, it's an absolutely vital relationship for us, Kieran. The two countries have strong people-to-people links, student exchanges, tourism, very strong economic ties, and of course at the security level we rely on each other to protect our domestic populations from terrorism, and this is becoming increasingly important as we fight the global battle against Islamic extremism. So today is an important day. The relationship between Prime Minister Abbott and Joko Widodo is very, very important, and I'm sure it will get back on an even keel.
Now, in terms of the broader regional issues, David alluded to that security focus that you mentioned as well. The big one, though, really for most of the countries is the Chinese approach to the South China Sea, and there is a sense among a number of analysts that I've spoken to that the Chinese are pushing the envelope while Obama is still in the White House. They think they've got a window of opportunity ahead of the 2016 presidential election. What do you think?
Well, Australia doesn't take sides on competing territorial claims, but what we do say is that all countries need to come to the table and resolve their differences in accordance with international law. And we have been concerned with the rise in tensions, particularly in the South China Sea between Vietnam and China, the Philippines and China, Brunei and so forth, but also in the East China Sea, the so-called Senkaku and the Diaoyu Islands, where Japan and China have competing claims. And the worry for the world is a miscalculation where two competing naval forces, for example, come into conflict and one thing spirals into another, and we just don't want to see that happen. So we call upon China as well as other countries with competing territorial claims to come to the table, resolve these issues peacefully, and recognise that these areas involve very vital sea lanes of communication where so much of Australia's trade goes through the maritime routes.
But it is precarious, isn't it? I know you speak about this miscalculation, but there is a real risk of that happening, given the Chinese approach to some of these issues, the fact that the US aren't going to simply take a back step as the preeminent security power in the region. The risk of a miscalculation is real.
Absolutely, and that has been commented on numerous times. I think having the United States deeply engaged in our region militarily is very important as a stabiliser, as a balance of power. Influence. The fact is the Americans have around 70,000 defence personnel in our part of the world, whether it's in Korea, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in the Philippines, or whether it's the Marines rotating through Darwin and the like. This is to be welcome. America is a great ally and friend of Australia, as well as a number of other countries, and I do think that their forward deployments into our part of the world help to stabilise any tensions that exist.
Let's get to some domestic politics now, and there's been a focus now on Labor. Tony Burke's use of travel expenses. He's issued a statement this morning, Josh Frydenberg, in which he refers to a number of the News Corp paper's stories today. He says, "My criticism of Bronwyn Bishop was that she had broken the rules. Today's articles explicitly acknowledge that there is no allegations that I have broken any of the rules at any point." Is that a fair retort there from Mr. Burke?
Absolutely not. Tony Burke's a hypocrite. He wants to hold members of the coalition to one standard and hold himself to another. I don't know how he can justify charging the taxpayer to go to a Robbie Williams concert or a Justin Bieber concert. Next he'll tell us that he has portfolio responsibilities for shadowing Kim Kardashian. I mean, get real, Tony Burke. If you've taken your family to Uluru, then defend it. If you've gone on expensive overseas trips, defend it. And if you've gone to these musical concerts, defend it. But don't be the chief attack dog on Bronwyn Bishop and other members of the coalition and not hold yourself yourself to that same standard of account.
I didn't think we'd ever discuss Justin Bieber on this program, Josh Frydenberg, but just to ask you about that, he received the tickets from NRMA, didn't charge the taxpayer to get there and took his kids to the concert.
Well, I'm just going by some of the media reports today. If all these examples of Tony Burke's expenses are above board, then let him explain that. But you know, I just think so much attention has been on the coalition here, whereas I've said many times in the past, this is a pox on both houses. We have a system where sometimes things can be within the entitlements, but outside community expectations, and that is why Tony Abbott has undertaken to do a proper root and branch review of the system. But Tony Burke has been the chief attack dog on the Labor Party, and now obviously he's finding it a bit uncomfortable when the attention is more focused on him.
For those who might be critical of the program this morning for not having a Labor voice, normally, as our viewers would be well aware, we have Ed Husic. He's had some car problems, hence no Labor voice this morning to respond to Josh Frydenberg. But more broadly on this issue, the seat of Mackellar, this is Bronwyn Bishop's seat, some backgrounding going on that a number of Liberals in New South Wales don't want her to recontest that. Christopher Pyne, a good friend of Bronwyn Bishop's this morning, saying he hopes that she does, and that she does contest another election, and that she would have been in Parliament then for 3 decades. What's your view on that? Should she call it a day, given the events of recent weeks?
Well, these are decisions for the individual involved, Kieran, and I'm sure lots of members of Parliament will provide gratuitous advice to Bronwyn as to what she wants to do with her own future. But let her make that decision. She's earned that right, having been in the Parliament for a long period of time. Sure, she's been taken in some controversy in recent weeks, but she has served the Parliament well over a long period of time in many different roles, and I think she's earned the right to choose her own time of departure from the Parliament, be it at the next election or beyond.
And is Tony Smith the likely replacement, as far as you can tell, for Speaker in the House?
Look, Tony Smith will make an excellent replacement. There are other contenders, no doubt, who'll put their hand up on my side of the political fence, and that's a decision for the party room. So let's have that vote in the party room. There won't be any captain's picks here, and I'm sure whoever is chosen will do a very, very good job.
And do you think that's a good thing, that there isn't a captain's pick, given the way the last one worked out?
I think it's quite clear that my colleagues wanted to have their own say as to who would be the Speaker, and given what's happened in recent weeks, I think that's appropriate, Kieran, and it's good to see a number of colleagues canvassing support, because having a bit of competition for a role as important as this gives members of the coalition a fair range of choice.
Has the Prime Minister's judgment copped a fair bit here too? Get a fair bit of collateral damage over this episode?
Look, I don't think so. Clearly, this has dragged on for some weeks, and it has been damaging for us. But at the same time, the Labor Party is now having to fend off allegations of misuse of entitlements on its own side. So until these issues are resolved with a change of the system, I think you'll see it being discussed on the sidelines of political discourse in this country.
Let's look at a few other issues to wrap up. The IR recommendations, the government balking at these. Is Mr Abbott and Senator Abetz, have they been spooked by the unions and Labor on when it comes to industrial reform? Absolutely not.
And this is a good report. It's been done by an independent expert, namely the Productivity Commission. It was an election commitment from us. It's a 1,000-page report. There's been more than 200 submissions, including more than 20 unions having contributed, as well as the ACTU. I think we need to consider the recommendations in this report. We need to have a comprehensive debate about it, whether the changes around unfair dismissals, selection of the commissioners, whether you have a, whether you, for small business, you make some changes around statutory contracts. Obviously, the penalty rates issue has been raised. Let all of these be the subject of discussion, but let not the Labor Party run a scare-mongering campaign about these recommendations to government, not by government, recommendations to government by an independent expert. Let not the Labor Party win the day by having this report buried before we've even begun the discussion.
But they're already running that campaign. It proved very effective last time. You could understand why Mr Abbott would be a little reticent.
Yeah, but this country does need to continue on the path of workplace relations reform. As Glenn Stevens, the Governor of the Reserve Bank, has said, at the end of the day, the strength of the economy comes down to productivity gains, and they could have been better over recent years. So one of the keys to productivity gains is workplace relations flexibility. We want to see a reinstatement of the Australian Building and Construction Commission. We don't want the Labor Party solution, which is that the unions come first and last every time. We want to see a more flexible labour market where small businesses can grow, where big businesses can grow, and ultimately people can be employed. And we need to adopt and adapt our system to the 21st century.
Can I ask you finally about this move by Bruce Bilson to tougher the Competition and Consumer Act relating to how companies exercise their market power, a so-called effects test to prevent big business from unfairly using their market power adversely against smaller business. The Business Council of Australia does not like what it's hearing from the government on this. Bilson says they're talking utter nonsense. Is the government being populist when it comes to this reform? Is it necessary?
Well, this reform idea has come out of the Harper Review, which is the first such review into competition policy since the Hilmer Review more than 20 years ago. Again, it's a comprehensive report, the subject being the product of extensive consultations. I noticed that the business groups are split, and you've got on the one hand the BCA who are against such a change, and you've got ACCI, the Australian Chamber of Commerce, on the other hand, who are in favour of such a change. The Cabinet has obviously had an extensive discussion about it, but the issue is not resolved. More debate will continue to take place. It will be the subject of discussion in the party room. But what we want to do is help business by having flexible tests in relation to competition, so that abuse of market power cannot hold back small business. So this has got some debate, some way to go in terms of this debate.
Assistant Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, appreciate it. We'll chat to you soon. A quick break, back in just a moment.